Thank you, Reinhardt, and I'd just like to express my appreciation to the speakers in this session. I will take some responsibility and some blame for the session. I really appreciate the fact that you've contributed. The session was set up, and again I'll take the responsibility for it, quite deliberately to just stir this debate about how we deal with structure for cattle breeding and information systems into the future. What I want to do is to, and some of these questions have been addressed, take again a fairly high view of things, and I'm going to just address two questions: who benefits, who contributes, and then a little bit about the Irish model and its outcome, and a couple of conclusions. I've taken this supply chain view. What we're trying to do in the next 20, 30 years is to make sure consumers, if that's the right word for us people, are well fed. And in this organisation, our businesses, we are trying to breed cattle that result in people being better well fed. And as a number of speakers have pointed out, that's a pretty long and tenuous connection between those two, even today. Breeder, maybe the feedlot, producer, processor, distributor, consumer. And the way these are connected is through the flow of money, by and large, and each of those is trying to make some sort of a living out of it. The breeder is receiving income from the sale of stock and spending money on a range of supply of inputs, and you get the idea of the supply chain. That's today. But next year, more or less the same, but some go, some come, and the year after that, and the year after that, and we're dealing with cattle breeding. 20, 30 years we're looking ahead. So the breeders that are going to be making decisions today are going to be doing something for consumers in 20 or 30 years' time. Okay, just think about the time horizons that are involved. The second question is who contributes, and essentially what is it that we're looking for contributions of in terms of delivering on that value chain. And I have two headings there: data and knowledge, and funding, which is just another way of saying resources. Data and knowledge, where does it come from? It can come from a whole range of places on that supply chain. Some of this data has been collected by the suppliers of the inputs, be it the herd book, be it the meat processor, be it the drug company. Some of the data is being collected by the distributor, the supermarkets, the Tesco's of this world. Some of it's being generated by the consumer. Okay, we don't necessarily get access to that. Certainly it's not coming from consumers. But some of the data, and this comes back to the last point, Mike Coffey's question, is coming from our research facilities. And the point is that this data in itself doesn't generate any knowledge, and it's ultimately, and I just use the heading very loosely, research that takes the data, takes existing knowledge, churns it around, and results eventually in products and services that are then being delivered back through the suppliers of the inputs to ultimately the breeder. So the second question, where does the funding come from? And essentially we have just two sources of funding, and one heading there is the taxation and levy. To varying extents, the people that contribute that money don't really decide whether they do or they don't. We know that about tax, and in a sense, levies operate on a very much the same principle. The other sort of, and I call that public funding just for simplicity. The other source of funding I call private funding, and it's coming from the suppliers of inputs. One way or another, these people, these organisations, are collecting money from the sale of inputs along that supply chain and channeling some of it off as a research investment. Okay, I think the model's pretty straightforward. The thing about private funding for research is only going to be made if the people that put the funding up think they can capture a return. And that, by definition, restricts the availability of the information that comes from that research. And that is one of our problems. Okay, and Chairman, we'll just about make up the time. The Irish model, and I mean, look, I don't have to say anything about the Irish model. You've probably heard too much about it. We are proud of it. But look, the principle, it's addressing data and information and the provision of services, innovation, funding, and I'm just going to talk about the progress we've made. The way the data aspect works, and this is, I think, crucial. What we've been able to do is to move down the supply chain with our systems. At this point, we're right into the processes of both milk and meat. We're not with the distributors yet, and we're not with the consumers yet. But I would say, watch this space, because that's where ultimately I think we need to get to if we're going to be able to really do something about making sure we feed the world in the future. The ICBF database is obviously the core to how we handle data, and it forms the basis of the information services that are being provided by all these service providers. And they deliver the service to the farmer, but the crucial point in our model is the role of that database. And again, I don't have to say it, you've heard it enough times. But think about the other element of it. That was the data part of it, the research, the innovation, the development of knowledge. And what's key with this database is that it is one of the inputs for research. The other input, of course, is the data that comes from the research farms, the universities, and nationally and internationally. The model, as you see, uses knowledge as an input, generates new knowledge, ultimately results in products and services, and you've seen that in the last few days. There is, however, an international consideration to this, and absolutely core to ICBF's strategy, and I think the Irish model, and I said this last night, is our support for ICAR. And for me, it does two things, really. ICAR, one, gives us access to data one way or another from all the other countries that are involved in cattle breeding to varying extents, and ultimately it's about data that we can trust. You know, it's data that we can use with confidence in our research and innovation. The other element relates to inter-bull and hopefully in due course inter-beef. It should, and we want it to give us access to genetic evaluations from other countries and breeding programs, again, that we can trust. In other words, we can deliver the information to farmers in Ireland so that those breeders at the end of the supply chain, so they can choose breeding stock that will ultimately help us feed the world's population. So that's the international aspect of it. Funding, and again, our funding model is relatively straightforward. It has a fairly large element of public funding, and hence, my earlier point, we're able to do lots of public good things. Just a sense for how much money is involved, ICBF turns over about $5 million a year. It's certainly humbling to be in the presence of much larger turnovers. Of that, in 2011, 2.67 million came from taxpayers. The Department of Agriculture look after these funds. That's the green line. 1.8 million came from services. You know, these are the services we deliver, like to varying extents, like other people. And a bit over 800,000 is coming from the industry, this tag levy type contribution. So we do have a good source of what I would define as public funding. What's the result of this? And you've seen various interpretations of this slide, and there's really 2 points I want to make. One is, in the period when Ireland was relying on the market, a world trading market of cattle and genetics, to try and deliver the things that farmers wanted, the genetic progress there for milk. Milk is, and this is in economic terms, the red line. As we all know, Holsteins came in and the milk yield went up. If you put it, and this is all in economic terms, but over that same period, fertility declined by about the same value. So for 20 years, breeding in Ireland contributed nothing to the profitability of Irish farmers. Absolutely nothing. And that was a reliance on the market to do the right thing. ICBF got going in 2000, and you can see the results. So I don't really have to say much more about that. But that's one of the outcomes, I think, of having a good structure, an open structure, and public funding. Who else benefited? One of the comments that was made to me early on when we were trying to get this thing off the ground was, look, this was to raise the initial capital. We wanted $2 million from the service providers in Ireland, the AI companies, milk recording and herd books. One of the comments was, it's like turkeys voting for Christmas. That was the sense and the sentiment that was being expressed. What happened to milk recording? It went from 41% of cows to, it went from 400,000 cows to 540,000 cows. What happened to herd book registrations? 90,000 to 120,000. What happened to the information available on commercial cattle? It went from 0.47 million to 1.32 million. The point is that from a service provision point of view, if you're in the herd book type activity, the milk recording space, this was a great outcome. For the AI companies, and there's two elements to this. What was the total uptake of AI? And this is just recorded AI progeny in our database. The black line, animals recorded with an AI SAR in the dairy sector, very nice growth. What happened in the mix of origin? And I just want you to focus on really the light green line, the one that ends up on the top. This is the percentage of bulls of Irish origin used in AI. It went from essentially 0 in 2001, and it's now at 30% or so. You can see who suffered, but the point is, for the Irish industry, this was very good news, just from a pure self-interest point of view. So in conclusion, Ireland has established a new infrastructure for recording and genetic evaluations. In essence, it's a partnership between service providers, farmers and government. Funding has been provided by a mix of taxpayer, industry and service income. This has resulted in incredible innovation, substantial short and long-term benefits for farmers and for service providers. I think it's a good model. Maybe we could have some more discussion about it. Thank you, Chairman.